Morning. Sound? Good. Check the sound after last time. See? I get better every time. It's taken, what, 3 years for me to still fucking figure shit out? Hi, Matt. Matt said, the true final boss is the friends we made along the way. And sometimes, yep. Anyway, probably won't pay attention to the chat too much today, but I will look at them after. So, I wanted to follow on a little bit from the stream because I rewatched it, obviously, about Kiwifarms the other day. And, kind of doing what I do, which is, first of all, I'd had no idea, there's a lot of conversations in adult land, okay? And I'm not saying Twitch isn't adult land, but I'm saying, some of us sort of older, more corporate, people with full-time jobs, people don't watch Twitch on the regular. I haven't really done a deep dive into the story of Twitch, and I did that in the last couple of days to try and figure out, because a lot of this stuff did strike me as Twitch stuff, like Twitch drama. There's stuff that I didn't understand, so I did a bit of a deep dive. Okay, I figured that Twitch was roughly, you can't know everything, but I figured that Twitch was roughly the same as, YouTube and, just sort of that on steroids. Right? And, us in adult land and podcast land and those who are sort of working in the field, I think even I have underestimated the extent of the mental health problem that we've got as a consequence of the incentives, to be trying to be generous. People who are prone to antisocial behaviour. Okay. Because a lot of this stuff, I started to, because part of watching a lot of the Kiwifarms stuff, and especially when you're not just immediately reacting and taking everything on face value, like all the fuckwits that are reporting about it, right? I've been joking about the teeth people. It's like all these people that are like, oh, they're lefty, but you can tell that they've had $30,000. If you've got $30,000 worth of teeth, you're a rich person. You're either American, you're middle class. It's like it's a giveaway. You were either once very rich or very rich. It's one of those things where you can tell. Anyway, that's a side point. So I make fun of the teeth people, right? LARPing. A lot of them are just, if you actually go into a lot of the academic and professional history of these sort of, TYT, these lefty like places that are big, these big YouTubers, they're all fucking journalism grads. They're all Ivy Leaguers. They're all like, children of doctors. They're all they're very affluent people. Okay, so let's not ignore that. Okay, so the people that are sort of LARPing about, all of this stuff, they have no real lived experience being desperate or being in a position of, severe poverty. What they are is someone who, there's a middle class guilt there. Okay, so their politics is coming from a place of privilege, which always corrupts that, always corrupts the perspective. So that's why I think that I also have maybe a slightly more rounded perspective, because I'm not somebody who's come from that. I have always been someone who was the underdog, right? And it's why I've sort of always defended the underdog and always empathise with people who are in a desperate situation. And I understand, and unless you understand what people will do when they are in a position of desperation, okay, we aren't our best selves when we're when we're not our best selves. You do things you don't want to do, and this is something that I think this is why I think a lot of these culture warriors and the YouTubers and, all those people in the media, again, I'm generalizing, but most of them did not come from proper, true struggle. And it shows. Okay. And this, I watch back my stream. I've looked at everyone's sort of perspective on this, including like Keffels, and I watched Ethan, and I watched, everyone on this. And I tried to see what the commonalities were because, again, the thing that sort of I think motivates me differently to sort of other people is that, first of all, not a journalism grad. I wanted to be a journalist, realised that that was fucking stupid. The second I had to write about a near plane crash, 150. My first assignment in journalism school was to write 150 words of hard news on a crash that didn't fucking happen. I went, this isn't for me. I prefer to write about things that are happening, that try to dissect why it might be happening and try to find solutions. So I'm more pragmatic. But you do see that sort of that journalism student, the film school student, where, there's nothing real in their sort of lived experience that informs their worldview. It is just, it's theory, that they're sort of basically just, spitting out an essay on behalf of their bosses, right? This is just a theme that I notice with a lot of these media people, especially in the United States, where access to education is, very much cut off from a lot of people who are, under middle class. A lot of people just don't have access to those things, okay? So again, take that stuff with, man bites dog. Yeah, exactly. So take all of this with a grain of salt, but also do take the time to look at the history of, again, this comes back to what I'm talking about, which is everything I say links to everything else. And part of, if you're new to my streams or new to watching me, I have gathered a few sort of extra sort of stragglers from this Kiwifarms thing. But if you're new to my stream, you're not going to get edited hot takes of lists. I actually actively oppose that. I think that it's part of the problem. And I think that a big part of speech is letting people to have imperfect thoughts, to just riff and have an idea, get it wrong, correct the record later, and, not be polished with fucking $30,000 teeth and all of the right ideas and absolute ideas out of the box. I instinctively don't trust somebody who is certain about anything. But what I do trust is people who are curious. Okay, so there's a few people and that's in all areas. So that will straddle left and right. So there's people who are in the sort of, the Rogan, multiverse who I talk to a lot. They're good, but they're curious people. Okay, there's people there who are incurious and are, there for the money. $30,000 teeth. $30,000 is cheap, but I'm just saying, just as a benchmark. I use it as a symbol of class. Like, it is one of those, when you understand the policy around dental, it's one of those things where you can tell, you can tell where someone comes from. So anyway, but I was trying to think, because I think that this is one of the big problems that I've observed with Twitch. And if you want to put some class analysis into something like Twitch, what I observed, so for those who aren't aware of what happened, where this whole Kiwifarms debacle came from, okay, like that led to sort of this campaign. Now, look, Kiwifarms have been a target for years and years and years, okay? I would say that they are no better or worse than any other sort of free internet forum where people can say what they like, okay? I think that a lot of normies have, I've said this in the previous stream, so I won't harp on about it, but a lot of normies, we've been so nudged and letterboxed into sort of acceptable language that I think it is actually jarring if you're sort of on the Fisher-Price internet and then you sort of go back onto sort of what the old internet used to be. And this is, it's a relic of what that used to be. I mean, recap, snarky recap, celebrity gossip, get off my internets, actually, I'd be interested. So if anyone knows Heather Armstrong Deuce, I would love to be able to talk to her, because she's a relic of that time as well. She was a key figure in Get Off My Internets, where they would just sort of, snark about somebody about someone on another website or a blogger who got a bit too big for their boots and would sort of, tear them down. So Get Off My Internets is another one. I was thinking about Perez Hilton. I mentioned Perez Hilton in the previous stream, where he was once man of the people, where he would sort of tear down the celebrities and, make fun of them. But there comes a point where, and that same thing happened with a lot of those early internets. I think a lot of these early internet celebrities, they started off as sort of one of us, okay, and they were snarky and like tearing down others. But then they got famous and they got a level of fame and they rode this sort of blogging wave. And this is why I think contextualizing Kiwifarms, but also just making sure that we're kind of precise in the way that just make sure that we're consistent, because there's parallels. And this is where, if you're on the left and you're having sort of arguments that speech is right wing, you're full of shit. But anyway, we'll get to that. But what happened with that sort of old blog scene was that you had people like Deuce.com. So Heather Armstrong of Deuce, she famously, she was actually on a previous stream, the one with Roderick Graham, where I streamed, and I said to him, like, people find it very difficult to understand that, and it's a funny joke, which is that I wanted to keep secrets, so I wrote it on the internet. Right? To say that now sounds like an absurdity, but unless you are sort of, you know, we kind of wrote things to our people in the head in the jar, the online, to the people in the box. And we were free and we wrote stuff, okay? And we were, you know, we sort of wrote about our lives. We wrote with abandon. I obviously regret that now because, you know, obviously, but, you know, we went through there were sort of discrete phases, especially around the early blogging years, that I think people skip by. And also because, you know, people like rewriting history and removing the archives and all those sorts of things. I feel the need to protect that history and tell it from my point of view. This is what the book that I was writing was about, but I just never get time anyway. If anyone wants to pay me to write a book, I'll write the book. But there's this, there was a discrete shift in the internet. But a lot of the people that come from, you know, the sort of Kiwifarms, 4chan. Again, I'm not lumping these communities in together because each one has its own discrete history, like with Reddit. Look up the story of Aaron Swartz, who was the third founder of Reddit, okay, for all intents and purposes, right? It was early, famously scrubbed from the founders of Reddit, but he was in constant conflict with Spez of Reddit over speech, okay? So Spez wanted to take it corporate and make money, but Aaron was he's one of those people that was like instrumental in, you know, like our open protocols like RSS feeds, Creative Commons, open access. So like, you know, he actually got, what happened was when you actually rub up against corporate interests, I want people to understand how severe those consequences can be, and that there have been like actual deaths as a result of this, actual suffering as a result of this. So people like me who do make a stand for Kiwifarms, I think to mischaracterize why is not only tremendously unfair, it's also ahistorical, because there is a very good historical reason why people like me might fight for someone like Kiwifarms. When you understand the story of people like Aaron Swartz, Julian Assange, you know, what has happened over time with Anonymous and, you know, various movements online where they've been sort of co-opted and taken over time at the expense of sort of corporate interests. And then the mean kids of, you know, the teeth people move in and start telling us what to do, okay? I'd give us no support or no transition, no means of defending ourselves or anything. We're just expected to roll over and take it. So I think that some people need a little bit of a lesson there. I'm not going to give too much, but do look up the story of Aaron Swartz, okay? Because he was a crusader for internet freedom and internet speech. And I'm simplifying this story. But he got arrested for, he was posthumously celebrated in the Internet Hall of Fame by the Internet Archive. Irony. Okay. But he was, he ended up, he was passionate about open information. So what he did was he decided to, okay, I'm simplifying, but he thought, okay, let's get a backup of all of the journals. So he used his MIT access at the time to open up, you know, to gain access to a bunch of journals. And he basically was passionately trying to make sure that that was all open. Anyway, the details of that are irrelevant. He didn't really do anything other than, you know, try to share information. Came down on him like a ton of bricks, and he was harassed so much by the powers that be in sort of the feds, and you know what, there was actually a congressional inquiry, you can look into it, but he was so unfairly treated. But he was faced with, you know, and basically, okay, I'm not explaining it well, but basically he was, you know, sort of like an Assange or Manning or, you know, those sorts of situations. And basically he was on trumped up charges, things like, you know, wire fraud, you know, all of these things, that he was facing like 100 years in prison. And they tried to get him to do a plea bargain. And what happened was he refused, because a condition of that plea bargain was for him to plead guilt, and he refused to plead guilt. Okay. even for exchange for like a 6-month prison term, which would have basically had him free and clear. But it was more a principle, okay, than it was a pragmatic thing. Most people would go, yeah, I'll plead guilty and take the deal. But he was someone who just went, no, I'm not going to plead guilty, I'm taking it. But they eventually drove him to a point where he was in such a state that he killed himself. Okay, so this is something, but he was posthumously, obviously, there was an inquiry and all that stuff. But look into these things. This is what the internet, these are the fights that the internet's built on. Okay, so when we're talking about, so I think that, all of these people that are so much about social justice, they are so fucking blind to these arguments, because they are sort of, again, I'm going to use the, prohibition argument, harm minimization, okay, moralizing. This is exactly what a lot of the sort of speech Puritans are. Ultimately, it's what makes this sort of this woke shit, right? Or this gentrified left, ultimately conservative and not left-wing, because, again, I'm simplifying prohibition, but we'll get there anyway. But this is where, these old blogs, so like Heather Armstrong, Deuce.com. So people, you need to understand that what we had for about 10 years, 15 years, okay, before all of the corporate sort of shit moved in and all the social media kicked in and all the marketers and the fucking scammers and all those people moved in, was freedom to express ourselves. And what it was that we were able to build discrete private communities of, like-minded people who liked reading our shit, and we'd share it and, build those communities, and we'd sort of find them that way. And part of that was things like, mummy blogging, okay, mums bitching about being mothers and like, sharing and bonding over sort of whinging about that. Okay, that's what Deuce was famous for. But what she also was famous for was that she was like slagging off her colleagues at work, and she got fired over her blog. She was one of those first early people to get fired over her blog because she was bitching out her colleagues. Again, that sort of, there's that history of, online colliding with offline that, if you cut Gen X some slack, and my generation, you cut us some slack, you'll understand sort of, and also be a bit more charitable, you'll understand sort of the inch by inch that these things have just slowly closed in on us, and we're having to now pay the price for basically just continuing with the thing that we were promised. I mentioned that in the last stream as well, where we're basically still just going along with, we're still expecting what we were promised. And, instead we had our data harvested, we had our, we were sold to the highest bidder. It was all weaponized against us. Obviously there's always been those security people and those paranoid people, but a lot of people went in blind and didn't think. We trusted tech. We trusted that it was going to be in our best interest. It was they were going to do the right thing. They sold us bullshit because, for some reason it was a blind spot, that because we had, that there was going to be some sort of big flip side. We didn't think of the cost. What we thought of was, okay, let's build utopia. Let's build this utopian thing. It's a new thing. Here's an opportunity to say what we want to say in the way we want to say it. People will understand there's a social contract with the internet that is different to the social contract that exists in meat space, right? And I think this is where people really don't understand that there was a very strong divide between online and offline for a long time. You would often have, I personally have had to sort of, like I've said, I've never been anonymous. So I've leaned in and pushed through all of these sort of persona versus, real life, the performative aspects of social media, the sort of playing a role versus who I really am, people taking jokes literally, people thinking that, a larger than life personality online means that I'm sort of gregarious or, obnoxious or whatever offline, which is not the case. It's just, you explore different parts of your identity online. And that's where that's the legacy that Kiwifarms comes out of. Okay. But what you've got to understand with the history here is that you don't just go from sort of the freedom of blogging straight to Kiwifarms. Okay. Over time, and this is where social media, like with things like Reddit, we keep being promised a place where we could be free. Okay. A place where we can express ourselves. We just say, okay, Facebook asks us, what are we doing? How are you feeling today? You're just going to, it asks you. It goes, asks you a question, and you go, well, all I did was answer your question that you put in the box, and I just put it in the box. I didn't really think that it was going to be a weapon, Right? Most people didn't think about it. We were just playing and we were drawing on graffiti walls and having fun and connecting with each other. And then at some point, real names started to collide, and it started to become, there was that understanding that, Facebook was separate from LinkedIn. LinkedIn was, it was naive, wasn't it, really, when you think about it? But, LinkedIn was separate from Facebook, and, people, you kept Facebook for friends. Twitter was just where you met new friends and you talked shit and head in a jar. But at some point, all that it all just collided into this clusterfuck of, just schizophrenia, for lack of a better word, sort of like people just not, like, all of these splits happening in terms of how you presented yourself online. Like, I was early with that, okay, and again, because it's always been under my real name, and again, for anyone who's worried about, if they go viral or whatever, it ends. It's dominant. The internet forgets. Google now mostly ranks based on relevance. I couldn't even find old articles and op-eds that I wrote. They're not there because media publications merge and move servers, and the permalinks move. And unless they've got all that stuff, I couldn't even find it on the archives. And that's really interesting because I've been published in various things, right? And I was thinking about the old article that I wrote, and I went to look for it. It's not there because it was paywalled and they've taken it off the archive. So that's very weird, isn't it? But anyway, side point. So there's what happened, and then there's what the record is, which is I can tell you that I wrote that article. I've got a copy of it somewhere, but I can't prove that it was published because it's nowhere online. But the internet does forget, okay? It's not forever, okay? That's one thing. But also you've got a cultural clash, right? I did talk about that generational aspect, but I think I need to emphasize that a bit more. But it wasn't sudden. It wasn't just like, here's this thing that we haven't quite figured out how to use yet. We're going to use it to talk to our friends in our voice and our tone. And then there's people that were rewarded and made famous. Perez Hilton, Deuce, those people, they started to get fame and they started to get mainstream attention, okay? Attention from the mainstream media. So there was that pathway that nobody saw before that. So, famously, Deuce got that HG TV deal, and then she sort of started to sanitize everything that she was saying. It was observable, okay? And this is where the get off my internet sort of snark kicked in. So, so the get off my internet, they started to sort of make fun of the fact that she'd sold out and that she was, at that point it was like, okay, she went from being like a mum who's just writing about her life and very compelling to someone who was monetizing her marriage and her children and trying to sort of negotiate that. Now, she's obviously had a massive, amazing journey through that. And there came that point where she went, you know what, this is not, it cost her marriage and various other things, right? So there's people who have like actually paid a real price for a lot of these things, and they've actually lived through why the ability to express yourself is important. There's also people that made this mistake and were naive and actually know some stuff and have some advice for those who are sitting on Twitch, okay? And I think I said this on Twitter last night, which was, if you're on Twitch and you are streaming 12 hours a day and subjecting yourself to abuse, okay, from either other streamers or especially ones that are bigger than you, and you go, okay, monetizing the hate. I mentioned that about Tim Pool before, okay? It's a very rare beast that can monetize their hate and it be good for them. It's not good for you. And this is where that you go, okay, somewhere along the line, because you've got people who are just, doing it for 12 hours. They think they're going to be the next Hassan Piker. They're sort of doing it for 12 hours a day. They're doing the grind. But what they're doing is they're also getting into fights. Now, this is where the Keffals thing kicks in. Okay. So a lot of this started with a sort of a Twitch war between Keffals and Destiny. Okay. Two prominent Twitch streamers who I didn't even know existed until I watch Hassan Piker, but that's because, I like his analysis and, other reasons that are inappropriate. But, it's, but I have a firm understanding of what, like a whole, there's this line with sort of parasocial and real life that I do keep them separate. I have got friends that are online, but I do still compartmentalize them to a degree. unless they're in that sort of inner circle where I've been friends with them from the old days, right? And, you know, I've met them in real life and all that sort of stuff. So I've got my inner circle of sort of online friends. But people are, you know, like I was, the takeaway, I went and watched, like this, I'm exhausted. Like, I've spent the last week, I haven't got as much work done as I wanted to do. I've got an assignment due on Monday, you know, for study, which, you know, I'll be all right. But I've spent so much time just observing. I just sat back and I just watched this. And I'm actually deeply concerned about the mental health aspects of this, more than I was before. I was already concerned, okay? I've already seen that this is a problem. But Twitch has a unique bullying culture where it's not just social capital that someone gets from bullying. It's a weird trauma bond that you get with a bully, where a big part of a streamer's strategy, like I can see this because, again, doing digital strategy, I can see how someone would make those calculations and see how that they can monetize hate and sort of, you know, play victim with raids and all that sort of stuff. So by picking on a bigger fish, so I've noticed there's this weird pecking order with Twitch. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not, you know, like I'm not a kid. I don't have time to watch Twitch all the time. So, but I have, obviously I have some understanding, having, you know, I know most things, okay. And I know the psychology of social media and, you know, user psychology. So I can, you know, extrapolate. But what I observed that is somewhat unique to Twitch and is also, you know, prevalent on Twitter, but Twitter doesn't have a direct monetary aspect to it that Twitch does. Okay, same thing with TikTok. TikTok has a somewhat direct monetary reward for this, which is to pick a fight with a bigger fish and hope that bigger fish claps back, and keep poking that, you know, keep poking it and poking it and poking it and hoping that they wouldn't, you know, that backlash will bring an audience to you. Okay. Now that's a phenomenon I've seen on, you know, that's a strategy on YouTube as well. It's not unusual. This is why these ecosystems, they tend to have clusters of fucking, you know, just bad, you know, you sit and you watch that, you know, the Majority Report sort of ecosystem, and it's just a culture of like mean people. Like, and that was the thing that I noticed, which is that most of the commentators, okay, and, you know, my early YouTube is that I kind of mimicked some of this stuff because I wasn't confident enough to sort of just show up as I am and be me. And this is sort of a more authentic version of sort of what because I was, you know, so nervous, and I was just figuring out how to do YouTube, trying to get over camera fright. You know, that was why I started. And I wanted to just start exploring some of this culture war stuff. And so the first thing that you do is you start to mimic those that, you know, it's like, you've seen that with, I don't know if anyone's got kids that make like gaming videos, and they sit there and it's like, or you watch videos where it's like a kid and they're like, oh, you know, they're talking to one person like, hey guys, it's like they're mimicking. It's how we learn. We learn by sort of, you know, and even comedians, all those people, right? They just, you sort of, until you find your own voice and your own identity, you kind of, you know, copy those that you admire. So, but one thing I noticed was that there was just an area that I was just never really comfortable with going. And obviously I got stuff wrong and I would punch down and stuff. But I just realized about maybe a year in that the motivation, that the only way to really succeed is to be nasty or ignore. So you've got there's something that you need to be that I am not in order to succeed on these platforms. And Twitter incentivizes the clapback, right? It's that clapback, you know, the quote tweet, the brigading stuff, okay, in the hope that, you know, they'll get the attention of people. Like that's a clear incentive there on Twitter, if you're familiar with Twitter. But Twitch is that with streaming, with people who are streaming 6, 7, 8 hours a day. It's their only social interaction. And I just don't feel, you know, and again, I'm sure that there are, and again, with a lot of young people who are not really mature enough to understand the difference between sort of parasocial relationships and real ones, okay, super online. And, you know, when someone's claiming that one platform in particular, and I'm not even saying this about Twitch, okay, because this is my area of interest, the thing that I was supposed to be working on this week, which was my pitch deck for tech, for my framework for community outreach programs and that sort of stuff that tech can implement at various levels and influencers can implement, and it's just strategies to make sure that like people stay well and healthy and connected, right? That's something that I've been working on for like years. Okay. And for some reason I thought, okay, I've got to sit and watch this thing. I just feel sometimes my instincts just draw me to something and I go, you know what, there's something here that that I need to understand. And that's curiosity. That's just being curious. And that's where I think, you know, you need to ease up on people for being curious as well. And we just need to ease up on people in general because these are the forces at play. But what I saw was that there's underneath sort of the careful's desk. So I don't know the history or legacy. I'm trying to stay out of the individual things. But what you see is a small creator leveraging a fight with a larger creator. That larger creator clapping back for whatever reason, okay? And then the drama between those two benefiting both of them, okay? But then you get this whole sort of, it's not so much the top ones because, you know, they're compensated for it. They're compensated well, you know, all of that sort of stuff, right? They have an account manager. You know, once you get to a certain level with sort of Twitch partnerships or YouTube partnerships or, you know, your verified check on Twitter and that sort of thing, you have, or you're a journalist, you have someone that you can contact at the platform or, you know, you're visible. So people care about you. But for me, there's that lower tier of creators who don't have a contact. They're sort of abandoned by the platforms. They're kind of figuring it out. And the only things that they have modeled to them is one thing I noticed, it just struck me on Twitch, which is there is this strong message to anybody who is starting streams or who wants to be a pro streamer that accepting abuse from, you know, larger creators or accepting this stuff is part of the job. Accepting this, you know, that in order to, it's kind of unnerving because it does feel like, and I've been glib about this idea of being a political cam girl, but it is effectively, you know, you've got these, like, you know, in many countries you've got where there's, you know, sweatshops and, you know, sort of bad, you know, poor labour standards and stuff. You know, you don't just have troll farms, but you have office buildings with cubicles, with, you know, cubicles full of young trafficked women or young women and all those things where they are streaming, you know, sex acts 24/7 and they are treated poorly. You know, where there's an incentive to make money, especially online, there's going to be massive systemic problems. Okay. That's just the nature of sort of capitalism and not looking after people and getting people to a place where they're so desperate that they're not in their right mind and not making good choices. But what I saw with Twitch was this, like I said, this incentive. Yeah. Okay, so Matt said in cubicles. Yeah, I watched, I had no, like, yeah, I'd been watching some documentaries on this stuff. And like this stuff takes you to a dark place. It really takes you to a dark place when you look at the extreme reality of your people should talk to my people, man. But this is the stuff that that I think the platforms know about, but they need to take a larger role or more proactive role in. And these are big problems. Like these are massive problems, but people like not just China, not you know, but like in the Philippines. So much like you would have had troll farms, you know, like or digital agencies or SEO agencies or anything like, or you know, where they basically, you know, have people in office buildings that are like virtual assistants. You know, it's the same thing is for streaming. So you got, you know, women on a 24-hour stream. Just sort of doing sex acts with sort of cat ears and all that sort of stuff, and they're on a stream and they do it in shifts and they stay on its constant stream and they're constantly gathering super chats and shit. And there's all these crypto scams on YouTube. You know, there's all these pop-up scams and all that stuff with again, you can't look at this stuff in isolation from like labor rights, okay, across the board, and you know, and economic situations and having people so that they're not so desperate that they fall into these things, right? But this is the problem we find ourselves in, which is that there's no real, and again, I'm not saying, this is the lie that I think we were told, that I think we maybe, again, unintended consequences, which is related very much to the talk about prohibition, but also where we went in thinking that this was going to solve a problem, but it created a much bigger one, which was that of access. So anybody being able to just turn on turn on a stream and monetize it, that's going to create these problems. But what Twitch seems to have also managed, or culturally, just from the ground up, is to create this sort of incentive to be bullied and humiliated for a small amount of money, right? And everyone's so focused on the drama between the sort of the bigger creators. But I there's been a few that I've seen who are they're not okay. Like they're being, again, bullied by Carefuls or bullied by Destiny or bullied by whoever, but they're used as content. And this is why when people suggested that I go on various channels, part of the reason why I'm selective about who I talk to is mostly because I want to be able to trust. I don't want to be humiliated. Like it's not something I'm good at. I humiliate myself in my own words, in my own time. But, I've been through all of these things. I know I know what needs to be done to succeed, and I'm not willing to pay the price that you need to pay to succeed in this space. And I am sure that if I had 10 minutes with Hassan Piker, he would absolutely confirm that, because I've seen the subtext of a lot of what this life is. And the life is very much that of you're working in a virtual brothel, okay, and you're being subjected to abuse. And there's nothing against sex workers. I'm just saying, again, there's different ways to look at sex work and brothels and those sorts of things. It leads to some of the other stuff I want to talk about. I want to talk about harm minimization. And this is an unintended consequence of everybody, first of all, being, in an economic position where they are, they don't really have any choices, or it's a false choice, and then they're demonized for those choices, such as Keffel's previous experience in porn. And she's been pretty open about why she did it, and I agree. I empathize with that. So fucking ease off on that. Because what you do is, it's not only just being beaten by the system to the point where you are making that choice, but then when you do make that choice and you do the thing that helps you to survive, you are then demonized and demoralized and shamed and, treated as subhuman, even when you sort of try to find a way out or try to get your life together like she has. Okay. Now, trying to be more charitable. Okay. But there is a clear incentive with the lower level creators who aren't quite making enough to justify it, where they are bullied, they are, there's an incentive there to pick a fight with a large fish. The large fish will bully them, and it creates really it is just a mirror of corporate culture as well, which is dog eat dog, climb the ladder, every man for himself. And what happens in corporate culture is that psychopaths rise to the top for the most part. There are exceptions. Okay, there are, but the people, usually what happens is, much like with Deuce, okay, Deuce was an anomaly, a phenomena. She just happened to sort of be right place, right time, rose into fame, but then all of the fucking middle class fucking teeth people, fuckwits behind her became the mummy bloggers, the professional mummy bloggers. You see what happens. But then those people, so Heather Armstrong, through sort of, again, she's obviously not now, but I'm just saying she's an interesting case study when you see creators as people, and when you see people on the internet as human, and when you see someone's history and this is why when you you work in social work or any kind of mental health, the first thing you do is you get a history on the person and you find out where they came from. You're curious, you go into history. Okay. And you go, okay, so how did we end up here? What got us here? And that's always been my instinct. Maybe it's because my first job was in child protection and social work. So it was just it's natural for me to just go, okay, so how do we get here? What do we do? This is a shit situation. There's no winning moves here. Okay, we've got no time for fucking utopianism where it's like an imaginary world where children aren't abused. But what we can do is figure out what is the best way forward for them so that we can, help them to, get them in the right direction. Okay. So this is why this utopian stuff, this theoretical shit, it is very much firmly a middle class problem, because if you haven't seen the complexity and intergenerational abuse or intergenerational poverty or those sort of entrenched attitudes and that sort of, the cycle that exists with these things, okay? There is no one fucking ideology, socialism included, socialism as an ideology or communism. They're just middle class LARPing fuckheads, okay? They're all part of a toolkit, okay? They're a different way of looking at a problem, and you use whatever tool you need to solve the problem in front of you at the time. So if you're in ideology land, you're probably privileged, okay? Because most of the people, and I've said this before, most of the people who are starving don't give a fuck unless they're fed. Most people who are dying don't give a fuck unless, someone can give them a cure. Most people don't care what they take for pain relief so long as they get pain relief. Okay. And this is one of those things. So that's where I come at this from. And this is my frustration with these, and I've seen this a few times. I've seen this whole, and this is that HRT debate, which I'll get to, right? Yeah, there is this management theory. Like this is the fucking rational choice theory is the worst thing to ever happen as a framework. This idea that, like people do, like some of us do. Okay, like this rational choice theory is this idea that we make like lots and lots of calculations, and it's either, win or loss, win or loss, win or loss, right? I mean, that's simplifying it, but for the most part, that's assumes that we're rational human beings. But what we are is complex, messy, crazy, unpredictable, human beings. And also choices that we make in one context, such as desperation, may not be the same choice we make in the context of when we're better off. Like when somebody is not homeless, okay, they're more likely to be able to get off drugs. When someone has a home, they're not, and has their basic needs met, they're less likely to go into things like, these types of, desperation like things, right? That's just empirically fucking true. But and this is where the right-wing moralizing comes in, because that whole idea of punitive punishment, or, is very much entrenched in American, like American brand particularly, but, this idea that it's the individual and God and nobody else, that it's not a village, it's God. God decides everything, and that's a fucking cop-out, okay? It's not a cop-out. It is a cop-out, because it does take a village to raise everybody and anyway, side point. So that's empirically true, okay? What I'm saying is empirically true. And anybody who is blaming the individual for their circumstances under structures that are like this, where, something just like Twitch, where, this Kiwifarms thing, nothing happens in a vacuum. And especially when the incentives exist in the media and in, and when I say the media, you know what I'm saying. Okay, the professional media class of corporate media who have taken two sides, who simplify everything. It's for or against, nature or nurture, fucking us versus them, fucking trans versus women, all the fucking cleavages all day, every day, for man bites dog or dog bites man, okay? And this is the thing where it's like, but nobody is actually like that, okay? So when you talk about harm minimization, and this is, it's building to that, which is that these guys who try to, who are, pro harm minimization in every other way, other than radicalization and other than speech and other than, radical political stuff, right? Or violence, okay? Or bigotry or whatever you want to call it, okay? It's the same thing. That's why you're conservative, because you're a prohibitionist. Whether it's words, you're punitive. If you are punitively minded, you are not progressive by the way that you are, because progressive as a psychology is generally more inclusive, okay? That's the idea. You're meant to be more pragmatic. You're meant to be more evidence-based. You're generally more open to more flexible and creative solutions. That's the definition of a progressive. If you are a, again, there's lots of different, but But again, when you look at history, okay, you look at historical trends, historical materialism, dun, 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 and you look at what happened and what root cause might be, which is that people's economic conditions or material conditions, don't get scared, fellas, determine a lot of their choices and influence a lot of their choices and influence a lot of the way that we interact with each other, okay? And the environment that you put people in, whether you set them up to fail or set them up to succeed, is where it's at, okay? So that's, again, facts don't care about your feelings. That's a fact. The fact is that feelings are real, and the fact is that feelings are complex. Okay. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so with Twitch, so you see though that there's this culture. So that's where it started, and I was like, this Kiwifarms, this is. I understand all the moving parts, and I've been working on the solution. And I sort of sit there, and I was taking in all this information. You know, Dr. House with the tennis ball. It's what I do. I sit there like this. You know, I'm the Dr. House of the internet. I could just kind of sit there and just like, okay, I've got to diagnose this problem, right? And I've got to figure out this solution because there is a fix. There is a fix. And I have been doing a lot of research on outreach and how to intervene and all that sort of thing. Right. And then I watched Careful's interview with Ethan, that he guy, whatever, H3 guy. And like this stuff about the HRT access stuff, right? DIY HRT and the porn, okay. And I think it's worth making sure that you are not focused on the spectacle or the tabloid nature of that. But in light of what I've said and what we know about prohibition and what we also know about unjust laws, okay, what we know about, the less shit option, okay. I understand why someone would be in such a desperate state that they trying to get access to hormone therapy, okay? Because the material conditions exist that create that, okay? And are we helping that problem or perpetuating that problem? And this is one of my, I think, grievances with the sort of hardcore gender critical, which is that it does come from a place of moral panic and not really understanding the psychology. Again, this is how you can spot whether someone has been in a really, really desperate place or not, which is that people who have been desperate before understand that people who are desperate do things that don't make sense. Okay, such as trying to figure out how to get HRT. Wasn't it's tapping people into resources. It's not for kids, all that stuff. Okay. And from all I can see, and why women go into porn is complex as well. So, ease up on that stuff. But again, it's funny to laugh at, but there's always that thing where you go, okay, this is a complex issue, so there's complex answers. So Kiwifarms people could be a little more empathetic in that regard and not be, and again, it's an outlet. So there's the history there. I'll talk about that in a minute as well. That's where I was going, but I'm just going where I go. But like with the Roe versus Wade overturning, abortion rights being eroded, access to healthcare in America. Again, you can't look at anything that people do or decisions that people make as a 1 and 0 choice. If you are in a place where you are 1 and 0 on a policy issue, and your position comes from a place of that person is doing bad, therefore punish them, That's an inherently conservative worldview. It comes from a puritanical worldview. It comes from one where of rational choice theory, of where you think that people are rational and making have all of the information and having all of those, all of those sorts of things. So targeting into this is why, okay, on its face, this is why I'm uncomfortable with Kiwifarms in general, because as funny as it is, as entertaining as it is, okay, and as much as I understand the history around sort of tearing down people who take themselves too seriously, there is, on the other side, there is a human being who's been dehumanized, who has pulled themselves out of, from what I can say, from drug addiction and porn into sort of doing other things and streaming. And again, I'm not defending all of the behavior, but I'm just saying, rather than, just for a minute, lean in and not see the people on your YouTube as cardboard cutouts, and see them as people who make complex choices for complex reasons. Because if you're not doing that, then you're buying into the power that you think you're fighting. Okay, the people who slap personality disorders onto people, the people who hand out SSRIs, okay, without actually getting to the root cause, the people who just fight, call people fascists and Nazis just because they disagree, the bad faith people on the other side who call socialists warm fuzzy people rather than actually having evidence for what works and what doesn't, okay, such as prohibitionism. Okay, the psychology of these things. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It might be pop psychology, but it's been proven true time and time again that when you take care, in varying ways, that if you take care of people's basic needs, they have more clear-headed, they make more moral choices, whatever the fuck you think that is, okay? So until you are taking care of the baseline shit, you have no position to judge anyone's choices. Unless you are collectively fighting for everyone's basic needs to be met, you have no opinion on morality or anything else, because people's choices are complex when they're desperate. And that's the elephant in the room here with Twitch. That is the elephant in the room with tech. And that is the elephant in the room with all of this stuff, which is that people are not making enough money. They are fucking desperate. They are doing whatever it takes to make money. And that includes letting themselves be bullied and punched and fucking, humiliated for a little bit of fucking autonomy and fame, because the alternative is, working in retail. The alternative is a shitty job, okay? That's why people are quitting their jobs, because they're fucking dehumanized and oppressed to a point where they're doing, and they see a way out, and they think this is a way out, but it's not. It's bad. It's bad for you, okay? Now, the internet was sold to us as something where we would share and we would do, good. And I think that, the internet again, we've written about this at length. In fact, I think Paul wrote it actually about Google when all those horrible Google searches were coming up. And it's like, well, no, the data isn't really the data's not manipulating us. It's us manipulating the data. And anybody who works in AI knows this. They know that, like famously the Microsoft AI that, 4chan thought was funny, and they they started getting the AI to spout white supremacy and racist shit because it was funny, okay? Punching up, it was just funny, right? But that's, again, there's complexity to this. But people, like with the data is ugly, okay? Because humans are ugly. But until we start looking at people, the reasons why people do stuff or have certain behaviors, nothing is clear cut. So, okay, so anyone who's studying sort of criminology or anything like that understands how complex these things are, especially juvenile justice. Okay, it is one of the hardest jobs that anyone can do, is to and especially the hardest cases of crime. Okay, which is that those who have done horrible things to people. But then when you hear their story, like most of them are, they had no shot to begin with. Okay. That's the thing, is what you got to look at history. But that's where Kiwifarms comes in to an extent, because there's another thing that we know, which is that when someone says something can't be done, first thing everyone wants to do is do it. I'm anti-authoritarian. As soon as someone says that I'm not allowed to do shit, Jehovah. Like, I just will fucking, don't tell me not, I can't say Jehovah. That's the first thing I'm going to say. That's a human impulse to do. Okay. You've also got political forces. Now, there's a bit of history with, I might do a little bit more. I might tease this a bit more and do focus on each platform's history. But you need to understand also. I don't know how to respond to that. Siri, just sorry about that. Hang on. I've been voice dictating by mistake to Siri. There we go. But what was I saying? No, but you also need to understand that where lolcows come from and how that is a sacred part of sort of a part of internet law, which is that there was a time with the internet where people that were one of us, they were just writing and, sharing experience, they monetized it and took off and started punching down on sort of us over time. So over time, sort of this gentrification happened through the middle class ladies and the middle class this, and then, even mummy forums. Like I detailed history of Mumsnet. This is just me assuming through the lens of what I know about internet history, which is that, all of the mummy forums, they just became fucking pram central and monetized and all about brands and, formula versus breast, all these wars, okay? All these religious wars that were used to sort of sell brands and sell different baby products. Like that was something that, early on with mother forums, created those big divides. So then women who, were doing them, because I've been fucking rallied by mothers on mummy forums forever. You sound surprised, but, because I've always been somewhat of a relaxed parent, hands-off kind of person, and I would clash with the natural parenting mob. Right, the breastfeeding fucking police and all those natural parenting people, and they would have their own forums and shit, and they would every so often come and crash my blog, and it was just like, well, I prefer, again, I will always take the view that demonizing people and making people feeling like shit for not making choices in their own lives. They're going to double down. And I went through that when I was a young mum. I was like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to set up a pro formula feeding forum just to piss them off. Like that's kind of where you do things. But over time, there's sort of, this sort of sanitization, because you sort of started to notice who was getting the gigs, who was getting the sponsorships. Mia Friedman from Mamma Mia, those people who just crashed it late, but just walked in and started doing all this like middle class nonsense and selling product, okay? And they were willing to just do products and shit and sell a synthetic version of what it was to initially be blogging about parenthood to your friends and snarking and that shared experience and frustration of kids, right? And then they would sort of turn it into a sort of this weird synthetic brand, okay? And it was like gentrified, right? And then, so over time, that resentment built, okay? And this is what you need to understand with this, which is, and I know that I sound that, this is what you need to understand. Tim Paul says, let me tell you this. See, the thing is, you need to understand that's mine. Everyone's got their little thing, little ticks. But anyway, so that resentment built over time. So there was that resentment, like old schoolers like me who wouldn't just sell out, who wouldn't sell out. We were constantly overlooked and constantly ignored at the expense of people who had they'd set up their blog before they even started. They had advertisers, they had a brand, all these lifestyle brands that you see now, where now it's all littered with ads and littered with shit and it's gone to fucking hell, okay? That's got its own rich history as well. But there's also that, you've got to remember the resentment, okay? So the reason why people... on Kiwifarms in particular, as a phenomenon, and I find it really fascinating as a forum because it's kind of a collision of multiple factors, okay, which, as you know, with Mumsnet and those other sort of feminist places where women would go to sort of have a safe space to like just chat. I used to enjoy being in the Jezebel comments and, mother forums, until I got kicked off them most of the time because I wasn't because I just make fun of people, right? And go, that there's more to life than being a mum, right? It's not your whole identity. And that's good advice, by the way, because when your kids grow up, they don't want to see you that much. So you got to have things outside your kids, okay? Life advice. But your job as a parent is to make it so they don't need you. That's your job. That's how you love your kids, is to make it so they can be out in the world. Anyway, there's history, which is that over time we were colonized by the lean-in ladies. So over time, and this happened over, this is I could go back, oh God, easily 20 years with this gradual erosion, okay, where the middle-class media ladies and the fucking wine ladies and the cat ladies and all those people, okay, slowly started to inch us out of our own turf, okay, to coin a phrase. And so over time, we were constantly sort of, I remember, 2004. Yeah, no, because I only was in mother forums for like when I was pregnant because I was bored and in bed. I usually just would only go in and out. I was never really anyway. So it must have been 2005-ish. Yeah, 2005. And I got into it because I just was like, because I was a young mum. I didn't have any money. And, like snarking at women with like $2,500 prams. And it's like, what the fuck? Okay. But they were making me feel like shit because I only had like, your standard stroller, right? Your standard stuff. And it was all just like, look at all the stuff I've got. But then, like they had material conditions that allowed them, time to breastfeed and, do all of that kind of stuff. They had maternity leave. I was always casual work and always, on contract and, young and, all that sort of stuff. So I always felt like that. And that resentment built over time because I would write about that experience. A lot of it's not in the archives anymore because I kind of, grew up. But, that was an outlet for me as a young mum to sort of process, the fact that I didn't have my own mother around, all that sort of stuff, okay, and my relationship with my daughter and all that sort of stuff. There was an unintended consequence there, which is that she fucking hated the fact that I wrote about her online. And I, again, didn't know at the time that it was going to go so public. It's just one of those things. So, but, over time we were but I never got any real financial benefit from it because I knew that the price of doing that would be to sell out and to sell product and to, say certain things that I didn't believe. I've always just said, I will say what I believe, win, lose or draw. And that's been, it's not commercially viable to do so. But over time, the people from Kiwifarms, this isn't even conscious. This is just my observation through my story over time, and trends. Like obviously some of the people that are drawn to Kiwifarms are there to just tear people down. But why is that? What's their story? Okay. The people that you call TERFs, right? Or the people that you call Nazis. Okay. If you have a deep understanding of how fascism works, okay, fascism comes from demagogues and rulers, can't think of the word at the moment, filling up space that socialism should, or that again, material conditions create certain outcomes, okay? And so by demonizing people who have economic problems, they may not have the education to know roughly what, they don't know, people don't know instinctively what fascism is versus socialism. They just watch Tucker Carlson or they watch fucking Tim Pool and he goes, yeah, they say what I think. And, they're sold a bullshit solution, but it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. They're just mistaken. And the problem with the left is that it's our job to take up that space and have the argument and defend on principle, not demonize people who are already sidelined and already vulnerable and already at risk. Okay. So I don't know if that came out right. Anyway, and this is where it's just backward, because this is, again, why this stuff is just so fucking middle class. Because anybody who's been desperate knows how desperate people behave. And anyone who's sidelined knows what it's like to be sidelined and knows that there is anger there and knows that people will double down on that anger if they feel isolated and alienated. Okay. So over time, throughout, that's why I alluded to, things like the Donald or Chapo Trap House or the gender critical subreddits, or eventually, all of these like gender critical accounts being banned, all of these things being deemed as hate. That blame falls firmly on the mainstream political left. And I've said this before, because if you don't welcome them, someone else will. And if you don't embrace it and get curious about why they believe it, and most of the women who are gender critical that you fucking call bigots and hateful and anti-trans, first of all, aren't fucking anti-trans. They're on your side. They've just got some concerns and want to set some boundaries. And second of all, they're women who have been traumatized, fucking abused. Okay, especially like if you listen to the trans widow story, you listen to those stories and you go, okay, well, why does her pain not matter? And, why are you not listening to her pain? Okay, she has come to her conclusions for certain reasons. Okay, and that is the job. It's the job of the left to listen to those concerns. It is not the job of the job of the right is to minimize those concerns and blame the women. Again, why it's inherently conservative. Because it's basically a middle-class circle jerk. Okay, that talks about victim blaming, talks about harm minimization, talks about fucking all these things, but only when it benefits you. When you get a C-suite fucking women in fucking C-level positions, or telling other women to lean in, or lecturing other women about what they wear and don't wear and say and don't say and how they move and what they do, and fucking just another version of that. Women talking too loud. Okay, women setting boundaries, all those things. Anybody who is a left-wing woman understands where TERFs are coming from and will build the bridge. Otherwise, you are coming from a completely conservative point of view, which is to blame someone else for their position rather than ask a problem about how they got there and how you can help persuade. And this is the thing with Kiwifarms, okay? Over time with the internet, and I'm jumping around a bit, but that's what I do. Fuck off. With Kiwifarms, okay, how did we get here? Ease up on fucking, like the people on Kiwifarms, I don't condone what they did, okay? I don't condone it, but I understand why they're there, because they have been inched out and squeezed out and squeezed out and squeezed out, and it's the only place where they can express themselves, okay? Also, with the securitization component, I'll talk about this another time, but I have talked about it in previous streams. But, like all the tactics that like feds and law enforcement and, various bad actors use on forums, we know about. So, like fed posting, people will go and post. If you're an enemy of the forum, you'll go and post something that'll, make the forum look bad. That's a tactic that's known since the beginning of time. So the reason why I am defending Kiwifarms mostly is because I know all of these things and I know this history, which is that anybody can post that stuff. I know why they are there. I know why there's probably 100 people there who are just saying words they aren't allowed to say anywhere else for the lols because it pisses you off. There's also, most people are not bad people. Okay, most people have legitimate reasons for why they are where they are. Okay, they're not anti-things necessarily. Most people, when confronted with a human being in front of them who is different to them, if you're nice to them, okay, and you understand and you connect with them on something what you've got in common, and in this instance, okay, Kiwifarms, Keffels, Prohibition. Okay. So this HRT thing, the DOA HRT, it's no different to, if you're supporting the anti-fucking trans legislation, if you're supporting all of this shit that has a legal outcome, which I've been talking about for some time, rather than this again, philosophical, theoretical, middle-class discussion, luxury belief about, the zero-sum stuff about, women versus trans women, or or buying into the moral panic side of this LGBT stuff that's sort of, pushed by the right and and using radfems as cover, which they did during Prohibition as well. Like I've said before, radfems come at it for a different reason, but the policy outcome is the same, and it's still a policy outcome that has the same sort of unintended consequences and does the same harm. So at the end of the day, it's a cop-out to defend your reasoning for a bad policy. It's still a bad policy, and that's why you got to cop it on the chin when you see these results. You can't have it both ways, okay? You can't be advocating for anti-LGBT legislation or defending people who advocate for it, or making it so that, harder for people to get gender affirming care, okay, whatever the fuck that means, okay, and then be surprised when people who have certain material conditions, not all of the information, okay, available to them, they might not feel like they've got any other option, go on a website and try to access HRT service, okay? If you're judging that, then you're no different to somebody who would criminalise women getting, information on how to perform an abortion themselves. All of these things are immensely fucking dangerous. Radicalisation, terrorism, extremism, like unsupervised HRT, unsupervised abortions, prohibitionism, and, people were drinking more fucking potent alcohol. They went from beer to fucking, bathtub spirits. There was more violence, more crime. It went to more organised crime as a result, okay? More endemic corruption with public officials, and it didn't work because people still wanted fucking alcohol. But also when it comes to speech, and this is why I think we should maybe call it speech prohibitionism, because it is ultimately the same kind of thing. Because people who have been, had their alcohol, it's been allowed, it's been free. When you take it away, there's going to be people who fucking get upset about it. And they go to the speakeasy and they want to just fucking let loose. But they're letting loose in a way that is more dangerous. And again, I'm not saying Kiwifarms inherently is dangerous. I'm saying they kind of, there is a funnel there. All data points to the radicalization funnel. If you're denying that, then you're probably someone who benefits from it, okay? And this is where, they're going to go to the speakeasy. They're going to take more potent alcohol. They're going to meet fucking dodgy people. There's going to be more corruption, and they're still going to fucking want to drink, okay? And the outcome is, it's just, it doesn't work. And it's the same thing with speech on the internet and people who have shit taken away that they were promised and that they had, that, as adults believe that they should be able to make the decision to do, okay? Don't be a speech prohibitionist. And that includes all words. So stop policing my fucking word, retard. I like that word, okay? Trust me. All right. Because it's that whole idea, again, the parallels are similar because a lot of the moral panic around alcohol was around, and also around anti sort of harm minimization stuff, is about gateway drugs. You look at this thing and it's like, okay, here's a left-wing argument. There's no, if you're going to apply, ideas, okay, or sort of, all of these things, be consistent. I have a harm minimization idea across the board. I'm consistent because I know what works and doesn't work, okay, which is that there's no such thing as a real gateway drug, okay? The reason why people get addicted to things is complex. It is often based on a lot of complex material circumstances, depending on the type of drug you're taking, depending on the type of, the social environment that you're in, whether you are, enabled by the people around you, whether you are a victim of abuse, whether you are, have an extremely stressful job. There's lots of reasons, okay? The amount of money you have, people who are poorer and get hooked on heroin obviously have vastly worse outcomes than those who have money and access to, prescribed opiates, okay? They're all going to fucking overdose. They're all addicts and they're all kind of drawn. It's not, but those who say, oh, well, they've fallen, it must be a moral failing. Let's just make it a moral issue rather than one that's complex and people fall into for various reasons. And again, as someone who knows, has watched someone wither away from addiction, okay, I know this stuff, okay? And that is that this stuff is complicated. It is not simple, and judging people doesn't work. Demonizing people doesn't work, and it makes them more resistant to help. Okay. This is why harm minimization is the only way to approach anything. And that includes forums, and that includes people being able to be free and being able to speak their mind, the methadone, okay? You're not going to get people to go cold turkey off of fucking things with new ideas and you just impose. They're just going to resist that stuff. And they're going to go further and further down the rabbit hole into the speakeasy, but it's not going to be the speakeasy. It's going to be a fucking, it'll be the crack den. Okay? And again, part of that is up to them. But when you have them in, with safe injecting sites, you have, again, I'm mixing up my analogies, but you're getting where I'm just riffing on this idea. Okay? But when you have, this harm minimization approach of safe injecting sites, addressing root cause like homelessness, making sure people get mental health care, you get them to their baseline and you get them where, they're in contact and you are able to support them further. And this is where the tech companies come in, because a lot of this stuff is on them. And this is why I've come to where I've come to, which is the outreach and better resources, because these things, harm minimization and these things only work if you also back it up with improving of material circumstances, okay, or, setting up the conditions, okay? So revenue sharing, better, access to mental health support for creators and users, outreach, okay, allowing people some freedom and some mistakes without feeling punished. Punitive measures don't work. Prison doesn't work. Censorship doesn't work. Prohibition doesn't work. Okay, they're the same thing. The underlying psychology is largely the same. Okay, punishment doesn't really work. Facts don't care about your feelings, conservatives. Punishment doesn't work. Okay. Science. Okay. Positive punishment doesn't work. Okay. So what we've got is a problem here where I'm trying to appeal to the left that cancelling ideas and cancelling people is counterproductive. Again, part of the reason why prohibition was passed was because the left had concerns, okay, particularly radical feminists, about, again, it's like letting, perfect be the enemy of good, okay, to coin a cliche. But, like I saw someone, there's another policy around sex workers at brothels and them allowing children at brothels. And I go, well, I understand that policy. It's a harm minimization policy, because when you work in child welfare, a lot of women are in sex work. No one's helping them. No one's giving them any fucking support. So, it's better that than leaving the kid at home and the kid not getting fed because the mum can't work and all those. There's lots and lots of different reasons why a mother might want, to be able to take their kid to a brothel. You might not agree with it because you're, whatever. But you need, again, that's just until you understand what it's like to be in a really desperate position and you're trying to get your way out. It's a harm minimization approach. Okay, you might not approve. I don't approve of unsupervised HRT. Okay, I think that it's incredibly dangerous, and it shouldn't happen. I don't agree with unsupervised abortions. I think they should be free and freely available and all of those sorts of things, because, the alternative is worse. Punitive doesn't work. Okay, punishment does not work. It makes things worse. The prison system doesn't work. Rehabilitation does, when you give them access to training and vocational and self-esteem and, multi-tiered support services, okay? Mental health treatment, medications, okay? Empower people to make good choices, and they will usually make good choices, okay? This is 101 shit. Facts don't care about your feelings, right-wingers, okay? It's what we know to be true. This works. And so ideology aside, capitalism, socialism, just stop. Okay, these are middle class views. Moralizing is a luxury belief when it comes to whether a specific isolated decision is right or wrong. Well, it depends. If you see the human who made the decision, it gets a little messier. And it's the same thing with language. People that are using certain language, or certain internet users using certain language or whatever, you've got to understand the context in which it operates. which is one where they can't say it anywhere else, one where they, like they've been kicked off for saying what was a fairly reasonable fucking view 10 years ago. They have, we've got a history of the internet with influencers kicking us off our own internet and all the things that we were promised, and people like me who are, promised a little bit of, autonomy and being able to make a living and, being able to do things on our own terms, only to have that just switched off at the whim of corporate media. Okay. And I am switched off. Okay. Getting blackballed by everybody for talking about this type of thing. And, making sure, sorry, that was my stutter, making sure that, but, like the tech companies, they're not off the hook, because a lot of this stuff is, harm minimization only works. So let's use methadone as an example, which is that methadone only works if you have a plan to sort of ease off the methadone. Okay. But you can only really overcome addiction if you've got the support in place, which is to, have better friends. If you're in a relationship with another addict, that makes it vastly more complex, because you're now dealing with two complex addictions that have, and there's also a sort of enabling and codependence and all those sorts of things that go with that. Okay. If they're homeless, getting them a house, if they're, all of these things, whereas tech just go, no, you're on your own, because if you fuck up, then it's your failing and you don't have any way back. It's not good enough. Okay. It's not good enough. Making well-being a lottery system that then blames people for their being human, while you make massive profits, that's a big problem. That's something where, no, you got to, tech has to make it right. We have to make it right. We have to figure out ways to make sure that those who are on our platforms are given what they're promised. Okay. This is the problem with, corporate lawyers or anyone, all these quibblers. They're always quibbling over details or law or what's technically legal or not legal. And I go, well, who gives a shit what's legal and technically legal? Okay. The Cloudflare thing was not only an overreach in terms of law and due process, but the principle of due process, not the technical, this is the problem with fucking, the desk murderers of the bureaucracy that we've got now, is that they've decided that the letter of the law matters more than the bigger picture and the intention of it, which is that due process is a fair fucking go, and that is a fair hearing and an understanding that if you fuck up, that you will have your day in court and be able to explain how you got to where you got and how you got there and how you can remedy it. That's what that's what the legal system is. It's not unlike, America, punitive. It's about punishment. Since the 70s, they moved from a more permissible sort of liberty model to a more, rights first model to a punitive model with the war on drugs and prisons and all that stuff. There was a buck in it. Free prison labour. Sounds a bit like Twitch. Exploited labour in a fucking hostile system that never sees, that never allows them to get out of the situation that they're in. And we're going to see a lot more doxing. We're going to see, until you remove the incentive, doxing, the root cause of doxing is the incentive to dox. And a lot of that is around tearing down another creator, starting wars with another creator, having that stuff escalate. The same thing with, blogging wars and all that stuff is, lolcows exist as a direct product of a hierarchical system where some get benefits and some get a voice and some get income and some make a living and some don't. And often it's those like me who have more knowledge, more experience, more talent and, more principles that are left behind. And we sit here and we go, fuck it, I'm going to write a manifesto. It's creative. So what? I don't write manifestos. I'm transparent, right? I write what I write. I take down it, whatever. But I'm just saying, get back to humanity, see people as humans, and start looking at root cause. Because I think you'll find that the people who are having a go at Keffels for fart porn and the people that are having a go at all that stuff, you actually have the same problem. And you should be understanding and reaching common ground, because I empathise with both. Okay? And I'm not sitting here and are you going to sit, and this is the thing that's inherently conservative, okay? which is appointing yourself as judge, jury, executioner of other people's private lives. Okay, that is what it means to be like inherently sort of right-wing and conservative, is that you think other people's lives are your fucking business. Okay, that's a right-wing thing. Now, they might tell you that it's a left-wing thing. That's 100 years of propaganda that I can't undo. Okay, but if you trust me, and you trust me to be honest, then you'll listen to what I say and take it on face value. Okay, I can't undo. I'm up against all this information and history and Wikipedia, all that shit. If you understand what happened with Kiwifarms and how like easily records and stuff are manipulated, imagine that over 100 years, okay, around the story around socialism and what it is. Okay, socialism wants you to be happy, free, you know, all of those sorts of things. There's nothing to be afraid of. But, and that's just for the right-wingers that might be watching, that might need just some reassurance that I see you and your anger and I know why. These guys might be telling you, you know, that they might be telling you that those other guys are the problem or that they're the threat, but they're not. Okay, it's the systems and it's your material conditions and it's your fear that is created by your government, your media, you know, all those things on a daily basis that tell you that it's your fault, and even because you know it's not your fault, you know that, you know, you're complex. Okay. This is the fundamental attribution bias, which is that we tend to be more charitable to ourselves. So all of us have a deep backstory and good intentions and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But those who do the same act who are outside of us, we tend to attribute to, you know, so we tend to attribute our circumstances or mistakes to our surrounding and circumstances, and the mistakes of others to the person. That's a normal thing to do. Okay. So when you are constantly being blamed and humiliated and told that you're a Nazi and told that you're a bigot and all those sorts of things, which, you know, that's a weapon. They want that. It's a normal part of your psychology to want to go, okay, that person's doing the same thing as me, but that's a bad person. Okay. That's a normal thing that's exploited, right, in psychology. So looping back to your earlier discussion, part of this relates to the erosion of private life where we share more than ever before, hence invite scrutiny, fair or otherwise, by strangers. Yeah, and you know, that it is another fundamental misunderstanding about, you know, that's that personalist political thing that I talked about. I think, did I? I called it that. I don't know if I talked about it. Which is the misunderstanding about, you know, the personal and the political, which is that, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is, that political is always personal, in the sense that, yes, it affects you personally, but, you know, like I've been rewatching Will and Grace, and we watched like I like Will and Grace, the first thing, and then I watched the reboot, and it's really fascinating because it really is a case study in how, like how this fucking, yeah, I sat there and because I think they aired just after Trump was elected, okay, and Roseanne went through, you know, the same thing, all these things, and there was that period where demonizing Trump supporters and calling them names and then all of these things, okay, it was very, very clear that there were insiders and outsiders in the media, and it was very clear. Like, I saw this early. I was like calling people like, I know why everyone voted for Trump. Like, what the fuck? Like, I know why. I don't agree with it, and I think that they have the wrong idea, but I can get it. You know, like, for the same reason 4chan does what it's the same reason Kiwifarms. It's like, because they hate you, because they don't like you, and you're not showing up. So you don't get to sit there in an ivory tower and not show up and not help and lecture and moralize and judge and then talk about how everything is complex when it's you, but it's never complex when it's them. And you can turn around and you go, okay, well, let's just demonize entire groups of people for having material conditions that are perfectly fucking understandable if you take 5 minutes to understand it. Teeth people. You know, like people make a lot of money demonizing the other side, and I don't, you know, it's And everyone is just too busy trying to win and too busy trying to dehumanize, and that's across the board. But I think we're all just turning a blind eye to the real human cost of a lot of this stuff. Yeah. Ben Elton did a book years ago on blind faith. It's called Blind Faith, and it was quite. I actually wouldn't mind rereading it because I wonder how it was very. I keep thinking that it was quite prophetic at the time. I'd be interested to see how it goes. He had initial things about this. And that was years ago he wrote that book. This has been, the Kiwifarms thing has really, it's kind of sticking with me, and I think I want to keep using it as a case study because just some consistency, intellectual consistency, again, and knowing what works and doesn't work through history. Okay, and understanding that, Kiwifarms has a history. The users of Kiwifarms have a history. They've got a story. There's also the other technical aspects of, just forum sliding and forum ruining and fucking, sabotage across the board, across forums. Like you have to give plausible deniability there. Okay. But you can't do any of this stuff. Okay. You can't just kick people off platforms. You can't just, make people go cold turkey without any support. It doesn't work. Okay. So I'm trying to design some sort of, harm minimization methadone type program for people who get banned from social networks or whatever, and see if there's a way to, engage or embrace them. Okay. That's kind of my life's mission. Before I started talking about this and got some scrutiny, I was supposed to work on this presentation last week, but I'm trying to get it done so I can pitch it in the new year and try to get funding for this project. Because again, like all these other people who are bad people get paid millions of dollars and I don't get paid anything. So I'm trying to figure out how I can make a living doing what I love, because it ain't the internet. It ain't this. This is not good for anybody. Okay. I do it because I like having the skills. And so if I'm asked to talk or I want to talk about something or communicate my ideas, I'm not too much of a bumbling mess. I'm a bumbling mess, but not too much. But it's just practice. It's muscle. It's exercise, right? It's not my job. It's like, it's exercise so I can keep the skill. Because I know well and truly now how this all works, what the incentives are, what you do and don't do. It's almost like I know shit because I was there. And I know all the people who went on and, who they became. And I don't want to become that. I've always been somebody who wanted to sit down with somebody one-to-one and go, okay, what's your story? Like that's always been sort of more my thing. And trying to help solve a problem in front of me with every toolkit and bit of experience I've ever, I've got. I like hard cases. I'm drawn to that. It's just, my life would be a lot easier if I was just building fucking, designing things and UX and, talking corporate shit. But I don't want to, because there's plenty of people that can do that, right? There's plenty of people that can just see people as as data points on a graph or, something to just be learned from and harvested for an AI that is oppressive and, punitive. Okay. I'd rather try to figure out how humans can work better with technology together for better outcomes for all of us. And a lot of that starts with economics. Okay. Facebook should be paying, and Google. Well, here we go. Here's a book. Angrynomics. They propose something called data dividend, where we're all compensated with basically a license fee for our data as compensation. So based on how long you've got and how much data they've got on you and all that sort of stuff, you are given a dividend, and that dividend pays every year. Okay. As a baseline, if you're a content creator and you do more, then you get a bigger share, like a dividend of it stuff. There's lots of different ways that we can do this. Also, to Twitch's credit, even though I was quite alarmed by some of the bullying that I saw, and just, again, when you kind of trained to spot someone who's not well, you go, that person's not well. They're not well, man. They're scared and they're not okay. These people are in prison and we're watching it. It's like Big Brother really just came to life and turned into a just every day for a lot of people. It's very, very, and it's not, and there's nothing, I'm not judging it. I'm trying to find a way for people to create in a way that's not such a grind. That's why I find Hassan Piker so interesting, because I think a lot of the reason why he does what he does is because he feels a sense of responsibility to be there for people. And that's not his job. It's not his responsibility. And that's been something that I've observed. Again, I'm just speaking just about what I see, but, there's people like that, it's like, well, I don't know if I think that the doxing is going to get worse. But it's not something that needs a punitive approach. We need to remove the incentives to do so, and a lot of that is based on economics and the incentives to and it's not, again, punishment doesn't work. I think getting people to understand the reality of what it's like to be in a desperate situation and empathize with each other is the answer. I think that the answer is in having a conversation with somebody and go, did you know what the actual predictable likely outcome and consequences of this is? Do you know what this looks like? Do you know what your future looks like? Okay. Telling these stories about people who had kids and they were sharing their lives, and then all of us decided, we've had our relationships with our kids destroyed because of this stuff. And we don't talk about it because we, out of respect for our kids, but we have, a lot of us have lived this and made these mistakes. And a lot of us have also, that's why I'd love to talk to Heather Armstrong. If anyone knows how I can get to Heather Armstrong, her and I could have a good conversation. But, and that this isn't a good path. Like, the reason why a lot of us don't have influence or don't seek it is because we had it early and decided not to have it. Okay, like I'm one of those people that sort of sits in the slipstream. It annoys me. I don't want to. Like, every time I get a bit of attention, I get up. I get very anxious because I go, oh fuck, here we go. It'd be nice to just make a quiet living as a consultant in the background with a quiet influence where I do my little thing without the other stuff. I mean, you can't have it both ways, but it's not a good life, man. I know enough celebrities, I know enough famous people, I know enough people who have gone through this over and over again. I know enough journalists that this is not, there's like maybe 1 in 100 that do okay, especially with child stars and kids, people that do it young. Okay. And that's what we need to, I think we need to have a better conversation about what motivates people to, and this is where the tech companies, again, I love the idea that everyone has access. I like that. As default, I like the idea that everyone has access. But there's got to be some onboarding, account management, outreach, support thing that happens earlier. And that's sort of, that's the kind of stuff that I'm working on. But, I imagine it'll fall on deaf ears, because at the end of the day, until it costs money. I mean, there's ways that Twitch and Facebook and Twitter and that can do this tomorrow, and that is to partner with people like BetterHelp. And when you get banned, have an account manager call, or reach out and go, okay, do you understand what the rules were, why this happened? How'd you get there? Okay, I can talk to Twitter, let's get it fixed. And then they go, oh, and they like Twitter and they're happy with Twitter, and, it's all good. And you get them the help that they need. That's how it should be run. Of course, we all know that as long as it's run by US corporations, the same way they run their prisons and that they run everything else, that's not going to happen. But there's a whole other world who get it. And maybe we can do it here. Maybe we can do it, maybe maybe we can work with European regulators on this stuff. There's ways to do things. Or if you know people, and I mean, I can pitch to anyone. I was an advertising agency for years. So I can pitch. It's not an issue. But this needs to be solved. It's just, I don't see how, well, first of all, okay, here's another thing. Everyone's doxing everyone on every platform, and Kiwifarms aren't to blame for that. Again, like I said, Kiwifarms aren't the problem. Okay. They exist as a symptom of a bigger problem, and they have the right to exist. This is a breach of process and protocol, both informal and formal, in terms of like the contract that we have with services like Cloudflare, and also just with the internet at large. This is a crisis of journalism and corruption of people with power. This is a problem that's not going away, and I until we have a proper conversation with good faith, with like I'm a big fan of not criminalizing anything as much as possible, and I don't see how, when we live in a fucking security state, intelligence community clusterfuck that we do now, I don't see how. I mean, the last 2 years have shown us just how little we can trust anybody when it comes to information. Doctors just, the people I talk to, when you're a trusted person and you listen, you'd be amazed what people tell you. Like, to be someone's counselor or social worker or psychologist or anything like that, or confidant or anything in that capacity, it is such an immense privilege and an immense responsibility as well. And like tech companies are no different, because they hold our secrets, they hold our data, they hold all of those things, and we have that relationship, and they've got to do better, because it's actually a privilege, not a right, and it's a responsibility. And you have a duty of care that when people give you their secrets, and when people surrender to you, and you promise that you're going to look after them, that you look after them. And until you do that, you've got no business trying to like prohibit anything that they use to make themselves feel better, whether that be substances, words, fucking outlets, self-destructive behaviors, self-harm, bullying. How they act is absolutely not their fault unless we're dealing from a baseline of good faith and health and love. All right. So Matt said, if you or someone you know have thoughts of self-harm by becoming a mummy blogger, here is a list of resources that can help you. Yeah, seriously, like we've been through it. And that's the thing that annoys me, is that now the people who are the worst possible representatives of the internet, the blue checks, the young, all these people, okay, they're the winners, but they're writing history because they won. But it's not what happened, okay? The people who built the internet, who see what happened and know what happened, are now the ones who have quiet influence, okay? And they haven't built careers on this stuff because they know how poisonous it is. And the problem is that every time I talk, because I've only got 7,000 followers or whatever the fuck it is now, and no blue check, and I won't stoop to certain levels just to get an audience, that people don't take me seriously. And it's like, well, okay, then you can do that, but I have the answers because I know. So anyway, I'm going to go. Hopefully that worked. I don't know. I wandered off in fucking tangents. I'm going to go. Love you. Feel free to become a patron if you like. It would be nice. Or donate. Or introduce me to like-minded people who are sick of this shit too. There's no point shouting at each other anymore, because there's no point. I just don't, I don't agree with. Anyway, I reject the premise. Because, like I said, this punitive stuff doesn't work. Punishment doesn't work. Prohibition doesn't work. And that's just, that's how it is. And if you understand how that works and how people will use various groups and various ideologies and manipulate things. Like one of the arguments against harm minimization policy is that it's more expensive because people live longer. That's pathological. If you're arguing that position, you're a terrible human being. I understand why, because somehow something's happened to you. I understand, because that's my job. But this is where we're at with debate. It's about winning the argument, not about solving the problem. And that is the problem that's the biggest problem we've got, because people are not okay. They're desperate and they're making decisions, and they're lashing out. Okay, they're in constant conflict. Everyone who is involved in this Kiwifarms thing is to blame, and on, you know, but also not to blame. Okay, you get what I'm saying? Sorry, they're responsible, but not to blame. Okay, no one comes out of this looking good, but we can learn from it, which is, okay, how do we make it so that these things don't happen? How can we, normie adults, be more alert? Because I've become more aware of how frequent doxing has become, and swatting, particularly on Twitch. It's become a funny viral thing, and you go, okay, we need to deal with this. And policing doesn't work. Policing is not, social work is yes, policing is a last resort. Okay, it's a last resort, and it is unfortunate that police are the primary contact of these things because, you know, again, that's a whole other fucking conversation. But I've said that, you know, militarized police is problem number one when it comes to swatting. Police shouldn't be showing up with firearms to a house with someone with a firearm, okay, in a desperate situation. There's lots and lots and lots of problems there. But blaming, you know, we can solve it. I'm sure we can solve it. It's a big one. It's a big one. It's like climate change. There's a whole bunch of unintended consequences because you know, and there's greed and, you know, interests, economic interests, and, you know, but ultimately we all want to survive. You know, we all want to solve the problem. We disagree on how. There's going to be fuckwits that use it and weaponize it for their own personal gain. That's going to happen. But for the most part, humans are trying their best. You know, some of us don't, but we're not going to sit there. If you're sitting there focused on plastic straws and policing plastic straws, then you're part of the problem too, because you alienate people. You can't change hearts and minds by doing that. Moralizing doesn't change people's minds. Judging people doesn't change people's minds. Shaming people doesn't change behavior. Okay, fat shaming doesn't make people lose weight. People, you know, arresting people doesn't make them, doesn't stop the crime. It makes it worse, especially when you're jailing fucking people for minor crimes. Okay, again, facts don't like you. Facts don't care about your feelings. Okay, they also don't care about your opinion. I like facts and evidence. The evidence shows that none of these things work. Anyway, and that's why the wokey fucks, media fucks, aren't progressive, because this is a pillar. And next time you see someone who's talking about prison abolition or inclusion or harm minimization when it comes to sex or you know, sex work, you know, decriminalization of drugs, say that about speech too. It's the same thing. Okay. So anyway, love you. Thanks for watching. Oh, hang on. Matt said plastic straws are demonstrably inferior to metal straws, but I will defend the right to wield plastic straws with my dying breath or something. Well, yeah, and also when you factor in that the United States military is actually the biggest polluter, but they've got more funding. Like, you know, yes, plastic straws are, you know, but again, it's that, you know exactly what it is. You know, I now know when something comes from America is when it blames individuals and makes individuals responsible for societal problems and systemic problems. That is it's not a uniquely American thing, but it's a weaponized American thing when it's like, okay, you know, again, that stuff comes from the big polluters, big oil, you know, the military industrial complex, that sort of stuff, where they go, no, it's plastic straws, not us. There's no evidence for climate change. But what we'll do is we'll have everyone fighting over plastic straws and policing each other and getting the feminists and the fucking trans women to fight rather than actually realize that there's plenty of resources and abundance and, you know, understanding and love for everybody. If everyone starts looking at us and what we do, a lot of their problems go away. And they, again, I'm a fan of peaceful revolution. If that can't be achieved, well, I won't participate, but I won't fucking be surprised either. But that's where we're heading. Fascism or fucking revolution. That's the only two outcomes. Because, and we're seeing it now, which is that if you don't have revolution, in order to stamp out, this is the theory, which is that in order to stamp out revolution, the government, that the more and more people get resentful, or the more angry people get, the more they fucking have to suppress, the more they have to clamp down, the more they have to fucking, you know, suppress the people, the more they have to militarize police, the more we're divided, the more we're fighting, right? All that stuff. And that sort of creates this perfect fucking fireball that is fascism. Okay, that's what it is when you understand it. So again, when you actually understand the TLDR, again, the quibbling fucks with their, like, you know, berets and shit, they're annoying too. They're middle class usually, and they're just, you know, it's like, no, what you need to know is that your anger is legitimate, that it is not you, it is not your fault, and that it can change. And you don't have to, you know, like you can actually passively resist these things. You can, you know, but you know, these guys aren't your friend either, okay? Because they still ultimately will blame you for your problems. They will still ultimately make it, you know, something about you that is shameful or wrong, or something that you have to fucking fix before they fix the system. Now, I'm a fan of personal responsibility, but personal responsibility kicks in after the collective stuff is taken care of, okay? No one's ever explained socialism that easily for you, have they? Anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. Feel free to become a patron, but I've, you know, do what I can. All right. I've streamed twice this week. That's amazing. Anyway, I love you. I'm going to go. I've got to go do some work. Paid work. Okay. Bye. Peace.